Stanley had no trouble falling asleep, but morning came much too quickly. Every muscle and joint in his body ached as he tried to get to sleep. He didn't think it was possible, but his body hurt more than it had done the day before. It wasn't just his arms and his back, but his ankles, legs, and waist also hurt. The only thing that got him out of bed was knowing that every second he wasted meant he was 1 second closer to the rising sun. He hated the sun. He could hardly lift his spoon during breakfast, and then he was out on the lake, his spoon replaced by a shovel. Then he found a crack in the ground and began his second hole. He stepped on the shovel blade and pushed on the very back of the shaft with the base of his thumb. This hurt less than trying to hold the shaft with his blistered fingers. He dug. He was careful to dump the dirt far away from the hole. He needed to save the area around the hole for when his hole got much deeper and wider. He didn't know if he'd ever get that far, but X-Ray was right. The second hole was the hardest. To finish it would be a miracle. As long as the sun wasn't out yet, he removed his cap and used it to protect his hands. Once the sun rose, he would have to put it back on his head. His neck and forehead had been badly burnt the day before. He took it one shovelful at a time and tried not to think of the awesome task that lay ahead of him. After an hour or so, his sore muscles seemed to loosen a little. He grunted as he tried to stick his shovel into the dirt. His cap slipped from out under his fingers, and the shovel fell free. He just let it lie there. He took a drink from his canteen. He guessed that the water truck should be coming any time soon, but he just didn't finish all his water, just in case he was wrong. He learned to wait until he saw the truck before drinking the last drop. The sun wasn't up yet, but the rays arced over the horizon and brought light to the sky. He reached down to pick up his cap, and there, next to it, he saw a wide, flat rock. As he put his cap on his head, he continued to look down at the rock. He picked it up. He thought he could see the shape of a fish, fossilised in it. He rubbed off some dirt, and the outline of the fish became clearer. The sun peeked over the horizon. He could actually see tiny lines where every one of the fish bones had been. He looked at the barren land all around him. True, everyone referred to this area as the lake, but it was still hard to believe that this dry wasteland was once full of water. Then he remembered what Mr. Sir and Mr. Pendanski had both said. If he dug up anything interesting, he should report it to one of them. If the warden liked it, he would get the rest of the day off. He looked back down at the fish. He'd found his miracle. He continued to dig, though very slowly. He waited for the water truck. He didn't want to bring attention to his find, afraid that one of the other boys might try and take it from him. He tossed the rock face down beside his pile of dirt, as if it was to no special value. A short while later, he saw the cloud of dirt heading across the lake. The truck stopped and the boys lined up. They're always lined in the same order. Stanley realised no matter who got there first, Zigzag was always at the front of the line. Then came Armpit, Squid, Zigzag, Magnet, and Zero. Stanley got in line behind Zero. He was glad to be at the back, so no one else would notice his fossil. His pants had very large pockets, but the rock still made a bulge. Mr. Pendanski filled each boy's canteen until Stanley was the only one left. "I found something," Stanley said, taking it out of his pocket. Mr. Pendanski reached for Stanley's canteen, but Stanley handed him the rock instead. "What's this?" "It's a fossil," said Stanley. "See the fish?" Mr. Pendanski looked again. "See, you can see all its little bones and everything," said Stanley. "Interesting," said Mr. Pendanski. "Let me have your canteen." Stanley handed it to him. Mr. Pendanski filled it and returned it. "So, do I get the day off?" "What for?" "You know, you said if I found something interesting, the warden might give me the day off." Mr. Pendanski laughed and gave the fossil back to Stanley. Sorry, Stanley. The warden isn't interested in fossils." "Let me see that," said Magnet, taking the rock from Stanley. Stanley continued to stare at Mr. Pendanski. "Hey, Zig, dig this rock." "Cool," said Zigzag. Stanley saw his fossil being passed around. "I don't see nothing," said X-Ray. He took off his glasses. wiped them with his dirty clothes, and then put them back on. See? Look at this little fishy, said Armpit. Chapter 11. Stanley returned to his hole. It wasn't fair. Mr. Pendanski had even said his fossil was interesting. He slammed the shovel back onto the ground and pried up another piece of earth. After a while, he noticed X-Ray had come by and was watching him dig. "Hey, caveman, let me talk to you a second," X-Ray said. Stanley put down his shovel and stepped up out of his hole. "Listen," said X-Ray, "if you find something, give it to me, okay?" Stanley wasn't sure what to say. X-Ray was clearly the leader of the group, and Stanley didn't want to get on his bad side. "You're new here, right?" said X-Ray. "I've been here for almost a year. I've never found anything. You know, my eyesight's no good. No one knows this, but that's why my name's X-Ray." Stanley shrugged his shoulders. "It's Pig Latin for Rex. That's all. I'm too blind to find anything." Stanley tried to remember how Pig Latin worked. X-Ray went on, "Why should you get the day off when you've only been here a couple of days? If anyone should get the day off, it should be me. That's only fair, right?" "Yes," Stanley agreed. X-Ray smiled. "You're a good guy, caveman." Stanley picked up his shovel. The more he thought about it, the more he was glad that he'd agreed to let X-Ray have anything else he might find. If he was going to survive in Camp Green Lake, it was far more important that X-Ray thought he was a good guy than for him to get the rest of the day off. Besides, he didn't expect to find anything anyway. There probably wasn't anything of interest out there, and even if there was, he'd never been what you would call lucky. He slammed his blade into the ground and dumped out another shovelful of dirt. It was little surprise, he thought, that X-Ray was the leader of the group, since he obviously wasn't the biggest or the toughest. In fact, except for Zero, X-Ray was the smallest. Armpit was the biggest, and Zigzag must have been taller than Armpit. But that was only because of his neck. Yet Armpit and all the others seemed to be willing to do whatever X-Ray asked them to do. As Stanley dug up yet another shovelful of dirt, it occurred to him that Armpit wasn't the biggest. He, the caveman, was bigger. He was glad they called him Caveman. It meant they accepted him as a member of their group. He would have been glad even if they called him Barfbag. It was quite remarkable to him. At school, bullies, like Derek Dunn, used to pick on him, yet Derek Dunn would be scared senseless by any of the boys here. As he dug his hole, Stanley thought about what it would be like if Derek Dunn had a fight with Armpit or Squid. Derek wouldn't stand a chance. He imagined what it would be like if he became good friends with them all. And then, for some of them, and for some reason, they all went to his school, and then Derek Dunn tried to steal his notebook. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" asked Squid, as he slams his hands into Derek Dunn's smug face. "Caveman's our friend," says Armpit, grabbing him by the shin collar. Stanley played the scene over and over in his mind, each time watching another boy from Group D beat up Derek Dunn. It helped him dig his hole and ease his own suffering. Whatever pain he felt, it was 10 times worse for Derek in his mind.